Welcome to Salem Witch Trials Daily. I'm Josh Hutchinson.
This is Sarah Jack. On Tuesday, August 2nd, 1692, Timothy Swan, Mary Walcott, and Ann Putnam Jr. filed a complaint against Mary Post of Rowley, and over Justice of the Peace Dudley Bradstreet issued a warrant for her arrest. Timothy Swan even posted a bond of £20 to prosecute the case.
Bradstreet ordered that Mary Post, daughter of witchcraft suspect Mary Bridges, be taken to Salem for examination by Bartholomew Gedney, John Hathorne, Jonathan Corwin, and John Higginson Jr., the four justices of the peace for Salem.
Another person from Rowley was active today as Rowley's John Shepard helped his sister-in-law Mary Green escape from the Ipswich Jail.
Mary Weber testified that about 6 or 7 years ago, when she was living at Casco Bay, George Burroughs was the local minister and lived close by. Mary was well acquainted with George's wife, Sarah, who was daughter to Mr. John Ruck of Salem.
Mary heard Sarah Burroughs talk about how unkind George was and how he would not allow her to write to her father. Following a fright in the night, Sarah asked Mary Weber to write to John Ruck on her behalf and encourage him to send for his daughter. Something had made a noise in the room where Sarah slept.
When Sarah called upon an enslaved woman to come up and help her, the woman said she could not come because something stopped her. But when George Burroughs was called, he was able to come up the stairs, and just then something strange jumped down from between a wall and the chimney and ran down the stairs. The enslaved woman told Sarah that she saw something that looked like a white calf.
On another occasion, Sarah and George were lying in bed, and Sarah felt something standing by her bed, breathing on her. She tried to move and speak, but could not for some time. Eventually, George stirred, and the creature vanished.
Mary Weber's husband, Samuel, testified that 7 or 8 years ago, while living in Casco Bay, he heard of George Burroughs' great strength. When George was at the Webers' house one day, Samuel spoke to him about this, and George said that he had once put his fingers in the bung of a barrel of molasses, lifted it, carried it around a bit, and set it back down.
John Rogers of Billerica testified against Martha Carrier that he was her near neighbor about 7 years ago when the two had a disagreement. Martha reportedly threatened John. Shortly after, though John doesn't say how long after, 2 large, lusty sows were lost. John found one dead near the Carrier house. Both its ears had been cut off. The other sow simply vanished. And we know they cut ears off in folk magic.
They did that to try to unbewitch animals that they thought witches had cast spells on. That same summer, John's cow stopped producing milk for some time, but at the end of the month, the cow was back to giving milk normally. Still, John believed that the sows and the cow were bewitched.
William Beale of Marblehead testified against Salem's Philip English. William claimed that in March 1691, he had gone to stay at the home of George Bonfield's because he had experienced a very great and racking pain in his body, and there was smallpox in his own home, so he wanted to get away from his sick son James.
Towards the end of March, William was lying in bed in the morning as light streamed into the room, and he was fully awake, he said. A dark shade covered the south jamb of the chimney, rising from the floor to the ceiling. At the same time, darkness crept over the room, from the south wall right into the middle.
These homes were scary, man. I would not want to sleep in one of these bedrooms.
Yeah, imagine he's probably actually half awake or something, and he's just seeing all this spookiness.
Within the darkness on the chimney jamb, William made out the shape of a man with ginormous legs. Looking around the room, William could see nothing that would cast such a shadow. He turned his head on his pillow, so he was still in bed and may have been mistaken about being wide awake.
He saw the shape of Philip English, with whom he was familiar. Upon William's prayer, the shape, shade, or person vanished. Around this time, William had received news that his son was going to recover from smallpox, but later in the day he learned his son had a pain in his side and thought he was going to die within 3 hours, which sadly came true.
William Daggett and Dr. Jackson, both of Marblehead, had attended to the sick James Beale. They told William that they were amazed James had died after they were so sure he was recovering. Several months later, William's son George also died, complaining of a stopping in his throat after he, too, had recovered from smallpox.
William Beale also said that in spring 1690, Philip English came into the home of a neighbor who William was visiting. Philip told William that he was the man who could testify to the bounds of Philip's land. William said he didn't know that Philip had any land in the area. The conversation continued a while before Philip English reportedly called William Beale a liar. After the men argued some more, they both departed.
That fall, Philip English had authorities arrest Richard Reed, who was in possession of the land in question. William Beale told Richard's son what he knew about the title to the land, and informed him that Thomas Farrar Sr. of Lynn could also testify about it.
Philip English is disputing the ownership of a plot of land in Marblehead that William Beale knows is owned by Richard Reed. When William finds out that Philip English arrested Richard Reed, he goes to Richard's son to tell him everything that he knows about the title to the land. He says he'll be able to come and witness if called upon to testify about the land, and that Thomas Farrar Sr. of Lynn could also be called in to talk about it. And so then Richard's son asks William to ride to Lynn, and at Lynn Mill, Richard found Thomas Farrar Sr. The two were then riding together along Lynn Common when blood gushed out of William's nose so much that he completely soaked a large handkerchief, and blood ran down his clothes and dripped onto the horse's mane. Even after William dismounted to stop being jounced around by the horse, the nosebleed continued. It went on all the way until he came to Richard Reed's house in Marblehead.
William doesn't say so outright, but this deposition seems to be intended to provide a reason why Philip English might have targeted him with witchcraft.